authorization, but wants a show of support from Capitol Hill. Joining us to discuss all of this is Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, a CNN military analyst and former commanding general, U.S. Army, Europe, and 7th Army, and Paul Cruikshank, CNN terrorism analyst and co-author of Agent Storm, My Life Inside Al-Qaeda and the CIA, which will be featured in a CNN documentary airing Tuesday, September 16th at 9 p.m., so make sure you catch that. Gentlemen, great to have you. General, I want to start with you. So the president will address the American public, as we know, tomorrow night, and we got a little bit of a preview as to what he plans to say about how he'll fight ISIS when he talked to Meet the Press on Sunday. Let me play that for you.
What this is similar to the kinds of counterterrorism campaigns that we've been engaging in consistently over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And the good news is that because of American leadership, we have, I believe, a broad-based coalition internationally and regionally to be able to deal with the problem.
General, what do we know about that broad-based coalition internationally that he says he's put together?
Well, the Secretary of State has already named some countries that are going to join us in this effort, but that's just the starter. Most of the ones that he named were European countries, and having fought in Iraq and partly in Afghanistan, you saw the great majority of our partners in those two countries coming from NATO and NATO partner nations. What I think the president now has to do is expand that recruitment effort and get some of the Gulf Cooperation Council nations and the Arab nations on board with this fight and make it a totally comprehensive approach toward fighting this scourge, which is ISIS.
Paul, do we have any idea if the Arab states are on board?
I think many of the Arab states are going to be on board. They see a real big threat from ISIS here. A country, for example, like Saudi Arabia, very, very worried about ISIS fighters coming back to Saudi Arabia, launching attacks there. So I think the Saudis will get involved. They probably won't send airplanes, warplanes into Syria or anything like that, but they're certainly going to support this financially and logistically in other ways.
General, you heard the president there in that statement that he just made. He said that we're going to continue the same counterterrorism campaign that we've been engaged in for the past 5, 6, or 7 years. Is that enough to fight ISIS, or do we need to ratchet it up a few notches?
Well, I did hear the president say that, and I think actually what he's probably going to say to the American people is this is going to be a much tougher campaign than we experienced in Iraq and Afghanistan. Certainly we do have some experience fighting these kind of individuals and these kinds of organizations, but it's going to be so much tougher and much more complex. And Allison, what I'd suggest is I hope we hear a little bit of a nuanced approach by the president to prepare the American people that for those of them saying, hey, we'll do this with airstrikes or we'll do it quickly, I think he's got to put that message aside and say this is going to be a very long fight to counter this organization.
One of the things, Paul, as you know, the U.S. has done effectively in the past, say, 5 years is target al-Qaeda leadership. So can we assume that the president is making plans to target al-Baghdadi, who is the head of ISIS?
Well, that's the only way you're going to be able to degrade and destroy this group, take out their leadership, take out their command and control. The United States has not done that yet. They've not gone after the top leadership of ISIS in Syria or Iraq. And one of the reasons is they don't have a good human intelligence network in those countries. They were able to develop that in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan and Yemen over the years, but they are yet to have that capability in place in Syria, eyes and ears on the ground, which makes it difficult for them to target these leaders. They're taking elaborate precautions, ISIS's leaders, in order to avoid these kind of U.S. strikes.
So, General, it sounds like that's a blind spot of ours. We don't know where the leaders are. How are we going to get around that?
No, I'm not sure that's true, Allison, and I'll add to what Paul said because it's a very good point. When I commanded a division task force in northern Iraq, we separated the targeting by layers. The higher echelons went after the leaders, the key leaders of the operational organization, as well as their financiers and some of the imams who were giving religious blessings because that's needed under Sharia law. The troops, the strikes would also go against, at the lower tactical level, against what we used to call the pipe swingers. So you have to have a delineation of responsibility in this kind of a fight. And when you're bringing a multinational coalition together, that's going to be very challenging to do. So you have to have the intelligence to go after that.
Paul, I read in the notes that you said when it came to ISIS, Assad has played his cards brilliantly. What do you mean?
Well, because he's created this choice for Western powers, sort of us or ISIS. In order to go effectively after ISIS, you're going to need boots on the ground in Syria. The Obama administration has signaled they want to build up some of these moderate opposition groups. Well, these groups don't really have any sort of capability to go after ISIS right now. Many of them are not particularly pro-American either, so quite problematic working with them. Also, some of them have ties to jihadist groups like Jabhat al-Nusra. Really, you know, if ISIS is the big thing you're worried about in Western national security terrorist plots in the United States and Europe, a lot of people in Europe, the foreign policy establishment there, are saying you have to start cooperating with Assad if you want to degrade and destroy this threat in Syria.
But General, haven't we also heard that Assad doesn't like ISIS? ISIS is also a threat to Syria.
Well, he has used ISIS to garner favor for himself, and that's been his terrorist threat as well. So he's almost built those up, and I think Paul would agree that that's been an interesting dynamic within Syria. It's countered al-Nusra. There are these internal power struggles, not only in Syria but also in Iraq, that we have to deal with, as well as just going after ISIS, and that's what makes this whole thing so complex. There are multiple groups that are challenging and have a jihadist mentality. It's just at different levels.
General Hertling, Paul Cruikshank, it could not be more complicated. Thank you for trying to explain it to us tonight. So the president has his work cut out for him tomorrow night.
We're going to be watching.
Yes.